but like using it as a storyboard. So I mean, do you kind of still carry about that same precision when you're going about these, other issues? Are you storyboarding them and like working well on your thumbnails? Like, did that help instill your practice to make your comics?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I professionally, I actually work in the toy industry, the consumer products,
Oh,
and
rad.
through that, I actually got to dabble a little bit in like a grassroots content or IP development department at my last company. So while I was like in that department, I did get to dabble a little bit in storyboards, in animatics, and that's what had reinvigorated that interest back into comics for myself.
Hmm.
Because for a long time, comics had been like this big daunting thing of like, I want to do these, but I don't know where to start.
Hmm.
Um, and I honestly, I find it's funny you mentioned because this weekend I've actually been working on thumbnails for issue 3.
Oh,
Um,
rad.
I find them the most enjoyable and also the most infuriating part.
Okay.
Um,
How so?
because, well, it's because I shouldn't say maybe infuriating is too strong of a word, but they are they're very taxing. They're very involved the way that I
Hmm.
go about thumbnails. I have seen how when other people share their process, a lot of their thumbnails are super loose. They're like, yeah, just get it done. Just I want beats and like figure out the layout. We'll figure out the details later.
Hmm.
Um, the way that I work, I tend to kind of push and pull back and forth between my thumbnails, and I do page plotting before I get to my scripts.
Okay.
If you're familiar with that at all, it's kind of
Kind of.
like
I mean, how would you do it? Because it could be different from how other creators might understand it too.
yeah. So the way that I learned, there's another guy on YouTube, and I apologize. I can't recall his name right now, but the way that he described it, or his process, I that it worked literally for me, and I was like, cool. I'm going to use this from now on. He creates a chart in Windows Doc. I use Google Docs instead,
Same.
but it's literally just like a big overview of like page 1 through 24 or however many pages you're planning in your issue. You mark whether or not that page is odd or even, like, am I turning the page?
Mm.
Right.
Okay.
Which is
Yeah.
a great thing to note in case you want to do big reveals or a change of
Hmm.
scene, what have you. And then on the third column, you have an area where you can literally write maybe a sentence or two. This is what happens on the page.
Oh, wow.
So from a distance, it gives you kind of that 50-yard view of like, okay, here's what happens in this issue. Does the pacing feel right? Am I
Mm.
spending too many pages in this area? Does this part of the story need more space to breathe? Do I need to add pages? Um, so I will use my plot or plotting graph
Hmm.
at the same time that I'm using my thumbnails. And as I'm jumping around with my thumbnails and like trying to figure out the layouts, trying to figure out like get a feel for like, does the pacing feel good? Am I tracking the eye through the page in a way that feels comfortable?
Hmm.
Um, if something's not working in the thumbnails, I will go back to the plots and I'll make adjustments here and there, vice
Oh.
versa. So it's yeah, it's definitely a process of like tugging a little here, pulling a little there, um,
I love that
which
viewpoint though. Like
yeah,
that's really cool. I feel I'm totally gonna steal this 100% because
please do, yeah.
yeah, that's such a good resource. Because I mean, a lot of times, especially writers, I have to say, is that when we're writing scripts, we don't always consider the left or right, like where it's landing in the book. And so,
Mm,
we'll all of a sudden toss in like a 2-page spread of some sort, and then there's always like, oh, but does this land right? That means we have to start the issue with it like on this side, and there's a lot of things like designer wise towards the end of the book that, or when the artist has it in their hands, that you realize like, oh, we messed up here. But like doing that work in the beginning and actually like knowing where your script is going and broken down for,
mhm,
that's so brilliant. Typically, like I know a lot of people, myself included, I just do kind of a paragraph and I'm just like, all right, this is what this issue is about. And I'm just going
mhm.
to pull from this paragraph. But like straight up just detailing it piece by piece is such a clearer way, but like separately on that graph. I really, really adore that. That's a cool little template. I'm definitely trying to pick up on now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like especially in indie comics, like what I love is there's and correct me if I'm wrong, this is my understanding of it, is like there's really no one standardized way of going about something. It's
Right.
always about like what works best for however you whatever speaks to you and works best for you to get the
Yeah.
product done.
I mean, kind of like
Um,
your lettering, like you're figuring out the best way. Like you have the idea, you know what it is, you've executed it, but now you're just trying to find shortcuts and like going to other creators and learning how they do things kind of can teach you one or two tricks about like one quick click that you didn't know about or a tool that you didn't know about in Illustrator that could totally
yeah,
transform what you're doing overall. And then sometimes with like tools like that, it's just the most ridiculous button that you're like, I never thought to click that one thing and it actually did everything I've been dreaming of this whole time
yeah.
manually.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can tell you, I being a more of a like drawing artist and less of a graphic designer, my introduction to like the Adobe suite was Photoshop, and for the
Mhm.
longest time I avoided Illustrator. My partner is the one who really like taught me how to use Illustrator. He's the reason I like he's the reason why Illustrator and I are friends now. But definitely through the process of lettering and layout and like setting up my pages in Illustrator and having to look up like, okay, if I want to warp the lettering in a certain way that doesn't
Mhm.
take away my ability to make it editable, right? So I
Mhm.
can still keep typing whatever I want, but now it's warped. I looked that up on YouTube. And I'm like, okay, how do I do this? Now I've learned something new in Illustrator. I'm like, now we're even better friends.
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, that's part of the thing about being a creator and indie creator, I mean, especially because there's so many things out there to make comics and there's so many tools you need to know and kind of get down and everything just feels like one of those coloring boxes where you have like 200 colors and you're like, where do I even start with like choosing 5 to start working with? Like every program feels like that. So going and
Hmm.
putting in the work and the research to like, all right, I've got to dig through the best 5 videos that shows me the shortcut and see which one like works best for me. And I mean,
Hmm.
it's so time consuming, but it's part of the craft. It's kind of weird. Like the research phase of learning how to teach yourself everything, such a deep part of the craft, especially for lettering and the coloring that you do too, which is really exquisite.
Thank you. I appreciate that.